And welcome back to the Dean Obeidallah Show. Right now, really happy to have on for the first time in 2025, Michael Steele, co-host of MSNBC's The Weekend, which you can watch 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern Time, and of course, former RNC chair. See him all the time on MSNBC, also offering commentary. Michael, nice to see you.
Good to see you, brother. Happy New Year. So
Happy
happy
New
to
Year.
be with you. Yeah, man, it's
Good to
good.
be with you. Are you ready for it? Whatever's coming?
Yeah, gotta be. You cannot do this with your head in dark places. It is you've got to keep it out in the light. You've got to see where you're going. You got to see what's coming at you. And yeah, I think a lot of us have thrown up the flares and the warning flags and the
Mhm.
signs and said it's coming, it's coming. Well, it's here. And now we are going to have to figure out how to deal with it. Although some of us have already figured out some parts of that and will
Mhm.
engage on that level. But, you know, the rest of it, you know, particularly from a political standpoint for Democrats, is I'm sorry, you can't do how Hakeem Jeffries started off his transfer of the gavel to Mike Johnson by saying, you know, now's the time to lay down your swords and pick up your bipartisan plowshares because they're going to shove that right up your behind. That's what you're dealing with. You're dealing with a
Mhm.
political force, and it is a force that has organized and galvanized itself, not since 2016, people. No, this has been a 50-year process that's been a long ball strategy by Republicans to get us to this point. Those of us at various time in my era, the Bush era, the Reagan era to some degree, who sort of battled against those darker angels to sort of keep those rat
Mhm.
bastards at bay. That fight was largely lost when 15 Republicans stood on the stage with Donald Trump in 2016 and capitulated. So here
Well,
we
my friend, yeah, I mean, you see, you're not privy to this, Michael, but the Democrats are doing a rope-a-dope strategy, like Muhammad Ali. They
Oh,
are,
oh, is that what that is?
it's rope-a-dope. That's the only thing. They're sucking him in, like it was Foreman that he fight there, or Kenny. I can't remember
Yeah,
who,
for me, yeah, yeah. It's
and he
just like,
sucked him in, and they get pounded, pounded, and pounded, and pounded. And at the end, when they're tired of beating on us, then we got him. Don't you see? Because nothing else makes sense, Michael. Because we were told by Democratic leaders that Donald Trump was, quote, a fascist, that he, quote, was a threat to our freedoms and democracy. And after November 5th, none of that language. It's as if it's a different person.
it's
What
all
am I?
gone.
What am I? I'm not kidding. I
When
understand.
did Hitler stop being Hitler?
Right. So that's what am I? Look, the Democratic base, people call on the show and they can't understand what's going on. At first, we understood it was a shock. We lost. You have to regroup. But there's no strategy now. You can say there are some Democrats who are fighters, but there's no
Yeah,
unified strategy. It's
no,
everywhere. From
it's a
John Fetterman hanging out at MAGA to Jasmine Crockett being tough and fighting, and everywhere in between, a lot of silence, a lot of common ground. I'm not the resistance. What should Democrats be doing in your point of view?
well, you have two choices at this point. I'm sorry, and I think Fetterman and Jasmine Crockett represent it. You're either going to go and bend a knee and pretend that, you know, if I'm nice to Donald Trump, if I, you know, drink a little MAGA tea, if I occasionally, you know, throw a nod his way, that I'll get the upper hand one day. And, you know, it's almost like the Sally Fields moment. He likes me. He really, really likes me.
Right.
Or you take these rat bastards, you grab them by the balls, and you fight them, and you
Mm-hmm.
say these are the fundamental principles that we stand on. You in your very existence is antithetical to that. You do not represent America in its traditions. You do not represent its future. You represent an ugly underbelly of grievance and regret and retribution because you don't get your way, and you want power for the sake of power. You want to be antagonistic because there's grift in that. You get paid the angrier you pretend to be, and you call out the bullshit. That's what you do. That's how this has to be played out. And you know, Jasmine Crockett isn't in every moment angry. She's
Right.
actually saying, okay, this is the bill, we're going to deal with this, or this is the issue, we're going to confront it. And then they show their behind, and she's like, okay, pause.
She's
But
so angry, Nancy Mace. Nancy Mace
and
wanted
then
to
that,
fight
yeah,
her. Actually, wanted to fight. That's because there's so many Democrats who are being quiet and subservient that Jasmine Crockett is such the out of the norm. That so
and
they're I'm
Nancy
going to go
Mace,
fight
Nancy
me.
Mace is, you want to take this outside? Excuse me, Nancy, you do not want any of that.
No.
You do not want any of that Texas hot sauce. Trust me, you don't want it anywhere near you. You running your mouth behind the safety of your title and the desk you're sitting at, talking about, can we, you want to take it outside. If I tell you what, if Jasmine Crockett stood up at that moment and said, let's go B, what you think Nancy gonna do? She gonna sit her little ass at that desk and say, "This is just unacceptable." But
Right.
that's the point.
Mm-hmm.
You push these folks to the brink of their bull, right? And call them out for what they're doing. You just can't sit there and go, "We're going to take our swords and turn them into plowshares." No, I got my sword for a reason because I can't trust you to do right and be right. So when you go sideways, I need to be able to defend this democracy. I need to be able to defend that elderly woman and her Medicaid. I need to be able to defend that family and how they educate their child. I need to be able to defend this young man who's discovering his sexuality. I need to be able to defend
Mm-hmm.
the America that we love. And if we're not making that case 24/7, Dean, you
I
and I are
I
just having a great conversation.
I know, and we'll be having it in a camp somewhere. I mean, that's the other part of this.
We're
Like
having a
telling
cancer.
Michael Steele, which I only hope they have free Wi-Fi, but knowing Trump, it won't be free. We'll have to pay for it. He'll charge us for Trump Wi-Fi, like TY-Fi, and it'll
Look,
go like
dude,
you're in
he's
the
gonna
camp. It costs $5 each for a day. Like, let me use your
right,
Wi-Fi.
right. To add insult to injury, he'll put a gold toilet in
Right, in every
every
camp.
tent.
The look, I am struggling to understand the Democratic strategy. I really am. And there are some Democrats that I think are clearly about it makes sense for them personally because their district, while they won re-election, Trump won it. Or their state, while they may have won a couple of years ago, Trump carried it this time, right? And that's Pennsylvania, but even other members of the House. And it's craven. We see that. I don't know. I don't understand what they think the Democratic base is going to do. Like, they're going to turn on a switch and go like, okay, it's time to fight because you got to stay in the game. It is like a boxing match. You got to train. You got to be in it. It's not fighting all the time. It's not angry all the time. You're absolutely right, Michael. But if there's a moment to rise up and let's come out and we need you to make calls and donate and all that stuff. If you've been a doormat for 6 months and now let's engage, I don't know how that works. I mean, you ran a party. Can you do it? Maybe you can. I'm not aware.
Well, look, the other thing I think to understand is, I believe to some extent that there's a great degree of misreading the 2024 election.
Mm-hmm.
The country is a center-right nation. It has been for a long time, and a lot of folks wanted to whistle past that particular point and pretend it wasn't, but it was. And it sort of elementally tells you how Republicans have been able to cobble together success in the face of a Barack Obama or in the face of even a Bill Clinton. But a Bill Clinton is a perfect illustration of that center right leaning. He understood it well enough to know how to craft together the elements to balance the nation's budget, to
Mm-hmm.
look at certain reforms, not just for the sake of the reform as Republicans wanted to do it, but for the sake of preventing Republicans from doing too much. And so there is there is that piece of it that I think gets lost after election. And you rightly noted at the beginning, there was that moment which Democrats do. They sort of go introvert. They regress to the space where they sit there with their heads in their hands and they're lamenting and they've got the ashes and sackcloths and they're whipping and beating themselves and second guessing. And that should last about 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't with Democrats. It's ongoing and then it metastasizes and it becomes something else. And that's a little bit of where we are right now. But I think that leads to a misreading of an election that, yes, was a center-right election, but you can't lose sight of the word center. That at the core of the country, while it may pretend it's more concerned about economic issues than democracy, or more about inflation than it is retribution, the reality of it is, at its core, it is not. It does not move too far away from the idea that the government should behave itself, our leaders should behave themselves. And when they start acting crazy, they want to make sure there's an appropriate check. That is an opportunity for Democrats to be that check, and to be that check that speaks to, as I noted before, the things that folks are presumably concerned about. You can't then look at this election, if that's your orientation, and say, oh my God, we're never going to beat Republicans again. Oh my God, the country's now gone MAGA. Oh my God, young black men are all up in that, and they want to be like Trump. Yeah, they may want to be like Trump, but if Trumpism and MAGA is hurting their grandmama, or is preventing them from getting ahead, then trust me, MAGA doesn't have those individuals. So you
Right.
still have to make the case. And so, yes, I think this election was a reaction to a lack of making the case by Democrats, right? That's why 10 million voters stayed home.
That's the biggest problem. You look at that. Our base didn't come out. I mean, the people who were on our side in the past
Yeah,
didn't
but
come out.
understand what that base was. It wasn't just Democrats. It was independent and
Yeah.
like-minded Republicans who
Hmm.
who aligned themselves with the Democratic base. I'm using air quotes here for those who are
Sure.
listening. And the reality of it is, no one bothered to address that in a holistic way. Look, say what you want about the Harris campaign, to be able to come into a space at lightning speed. It's literally like taking off at warp speed, and getting to your destination and having to slow down and stop in warp
Right.
speed. Everybody's seen Star Wars. You know
Sure.
how that works, right? You
Yeah.
know the imagery. That was her campaign. And yet, there were aspects and elements of it, sure, that should have been corrected, could have been corrected. Some different people listening to folks like me trying to tell them, don't do this shit because it's not going to work the way you think it's going to work. You need to engage young black men out here who are not gay, who are not this, who are not that, but you're trying to put them all in the same bucket, but they are a group by themselves. That's
Hmm.
why Joe Rogan and Donald Trump has them, right? So you need to understand why they're in that space. And so there is a lot of stuff that was missed. But even despite that, she was able to put together a credible effort to do it, as I like to say with the Ginger Rogers example, in high heels and backwards, right? She
Right.
she had to do the impossible. But that did not mean, failing that the country rejected this idea of the country that the Democrats were trying to offer up. It's just that messaging just fell flat. So now you got to regroup and understand your messaging. I didn't look when I came in 2010. We're in the same boat. Our
Yeah.
messaging sucked. We
Yep.
just gotten our clocks cleaned in a presidential by Obama. We had lost the Senate, the House from 2006. Um, we're a party with no brand. We're a party with no message, and our leaders are walking around with their heads up their ass, right? Not listening to the base and misreading the tea leaves. You got to come in and you got to go, okay, y'all. All right, here we go. Sit down, everybody. This is the group. This is the view from here. And this is how we move. That's what the Democratic or the DNC election for chairman is going to be about. That's what Akeem is going to have to figure out how to navigate in the House. That's what Chuck Schumer, I'm be honest with you, Chuck Schumer's got to put on his best McConnell, because right now he's the weakest link in the Senate, in my view, right? Because he's not going to use the Senate the way a Mitch McConnell would use the Senate if the roles were reversed. Trust me on that.
Sure.
Your last line of defense right now is the United States Senate. And you're going to have to be able to backroom some of those Republicans who are not MAGA, who do not subscribe to this. You've got to give them the reason to come out and stand with you, to take that second and third vote that the Republicans need away from them in order for you to leverage opportunity. And the same is true in the House. No, I'm not. I'm sorry. I'm not going out into this battle with a plowshare. I may go back to the barn and get it later, but right now
Right.
I'm going out into the
Right.
field with a backhoe to dig your ass up and uproot you from our
I,
body politic. That's what the Democrats need to think about.
I'm chatting with Michael Steele, and I wish they would. So let's talk a little bit about Trump here. For example, his selection of Pete Hegseth to be Secretary of Defense. Donald Trump could have found a qualified person who was not credibly accused of sexual assault, who was not incompetent, who was not paid hush money, who was not an open anti-Muslim bigot, as he wrote about in his book, has a drinking problem and ran veterans organizations, and certainly for the one of them didn't do a good job. He could have found someone who really lined up with him, but he went with Pete Hegseth. And what is your take on what is so alluring about Pete Hegseth for Secretary of Defense?
He looks good on TV. He's got the gift of gab, as we just saw in this hearing, where
Mhm.
he can bullshit the best of them and probably better. And the most important element, he will do exactly what Donald Trump tells him to do because Donald Trump gave him an opportunity he never, and I cannot emphasize the word never enough, he
Mhm.
would never otherwise have. There is not a universe. You could go out to Earth 712, and in Earth
In
712,
the
Pete
multiverse, right?
Hegseth is not the Secretary of Defense. There is no planet in any universe in which that would happen without Donald Trump. Pete Hegseth knows that, and Pete Hegseth will be absolutely loyal to that. And so when Donald Trump says, we're no longer doing NATO, we're no longer doing NATO. When Donald Trump says, you know what, you can tell our allies to shove it up their ass because this is what we're going to do in Europe and in Asia, and this is going to be our defense posture because this is about America and America only. That's exactly what he's going to say. That's exactly what he's going to do. There is no universe. You can go out to 712, even if Pete Hegseth happened to be the Secretary of Defense, in which he would do anything other than what Donald Trump tells him. So we need to understand that about him. We
Hmm.
need to understand that about Kash Patel. We need to understand that about what's her name?
Pam Bondi.
Tulsi Gabbard.
Oh,
We need
Tulsi
to
Gabbard.
understand that about Pam Bondi.
Yeah.
Every last one of them. And if the Democrats and those of us in the trenches in this fight don't understand that, you've already lost the battle that's coming at you. You've already lost it.
Do
You
you?
need to be thinking strategically right now,
Right.
Dean, how
I'm
you
trying.
level up against Secretary Hegseth, because there will be scandals coming from this department. Period. A man has been alleged to have a drinking problem. People don't make that shit up unless they've actually seen it and
Right.
it's real. The man has had a problem with womanizing. He can show his pretty blonde wife with him all he wants, but we know he has propensity to put his sling someplace else. These things matter. Democrats were ineffective in making that part of the character of the next Secretary of Defense, at the same time juxtaposing it against the realities of the job. And that's the part everyone was talking about, focusing on what do you do about women in the military? We know that. Give me a scenario in which that matters, right? Give me a
That's a good point.
real time scenario right now. So, Mr. Secretary, do you plan to pull women out of the Middle East? Do you plan to
Hmm.
pull women out of the European theater? What? So that's how you have to approach each of these four misfits, because that's what they are. They're part of that menagerie of misfits that Donald Trump wants to cover for him because they look good, they're all pretty, right? They sound good for him, They make the case he wants them to make, and they know when they call, he gets the call to them or they get the call from him. The answer is yes, sir. How high, how far, etc., etc.
Do you expect Pete Hegseth to have a military parade for Donald Trump? Because he wanted one the first time. Remember
Yes,
that?
perhaps that's my point. Exactly. Exactly. Next 4th of July. Oh, what do you think is going to happen on the celebration of our 250th anniversary birthday? What do you think is going to happen? We're going to have friggin' tanks running down Pennsylvania Avenue because, Mr. I'm so military, I'm so about it all, is going to want to see tanks because he lives that Russian ethos. He wants the optics and the power that comes from he equates that as an extension of his power. So absolutely, Pete Hegseth is going to absolutely give him a military parade up and down Pennsylvania Avenue with tanks and weapons and everything else to show hey, Mr. Putin, I can do it too.
Yep. He loves that. Look, Michael, in the big picture, are are people grasping the way you view what the next few years will be under Donald Trump in terms of how bad, how dark they can be? Do people, we have the capability, the imagination to do that if we want to, but do you get a sense that people are not imagining it or they're hoping it's not going to be as bad, or are they delusional? Like, what is going
All
on?
three of those.
You do.
All three of them.
Yeah.
They're hoping it, they don't think it's going to be as bad, and they're delusional about the other two. They are. I mean, I don't, how else do I explain it? How else do you and I sitting here today have this conversation? How else do you explain 2024 election? I mean, I'm sorry. Maybe it's just me, but yeah, I don't like inflation. But you know what I like less than inflation is a guy who tells me he wants to put my ass in jail
Right.
because he doesn't like my politics, right? So if I'm looking at what are the evils here, and I'm weighing, yes, inflation's bad and it hurts my kitchen table wallet, but I may not have a kitchen table to go home to. Guess what? I'm going to vote my interest here and say, I'd rather go to a table where eggs cost me maybe $1 more
Right.
than
That's,
not to be able to get to that table at all.
there was something I had on A.G. Ellison, Keith Ellison, my longtime friend last week. And I asked him, what is he hearing? And he shared, and you should have him on your show because I tried to make it get pressed, but it doesn't. But if it goes on your show, he will. He said point blank, because he's fighting Trump and standing up. He said he's talked to Democratic leaders who have said to him that they believe he's a fascist and they fear him and they want to keep their head down so he doesn't come for them. And he said to them, it's like the old poem from the Nazi Germany. They're going to come for each of you and no one's going to be left for you. You got to all stand up now. That was his point. And he said point blank, I hear conversations with Democrats who go, I'm just going to cover my ass. I'm going to keep my head down because I do believe he's a bad guy, Trump. And let's hope it just passes. And he's like, that's the worst approach ever. So I sincerely hope you have him on because might shame other Democrats if that makes a lot of press on MSNBC. Because he said it point blank. It was on the show. I released the clip. It went, people liked it on social media, but he was saying very truthfully that's what he's hearing, and he's stunned by it.
I'm not stunned by it.
Really?
I fully expect it
Really?
because there are people. It's like what it's like sometimes. So you have. I thought a little bit about this. It's like you ever come up on an accident and you just sort of third party observation.
Mm-hmm.
Horrible accident. You have the people who jump right in and try to save what they can save, pull
Sure.
the person out of the mangled car, etc. And this is before the ambulances show up and the police show up, right? Accidents it's just happening. Then you've got the people who pull out their camera because they want to film it because their selfish interest is I want to put this up on social media and get the likes and the clicks.
Right.
Now, I know some will argue, no, we want to record what happened. We want to show what happened. Okay, yeah, you want to believe that? Go ahead. I say put the damn camera down and help them get the people out of the car because right now that's saving the life.
Mm-hmm.
You're not saving the life filming the person in the mangled car.
Right.
The third person is the one who stands around talking to other people about what they're seeing. That's what you just described, right? They know I need to get in the game. They know what's required in the moment. All of us need to go in. Now, there's an argument, well, too many people trying to help can cause a problem. True. But in a 7, 8, 10 car pileup, there's enough work for everybody to get involved, right? That's what
Right.
is happening right now with us. This is a massive pileup. This is not just two cars that have banged into each other. This is not just the Republican Party and Democratic Party had a collision. This is the Republican Party having a collision with every facet of what defines us as Americans. So it's a multifaceted
Yep.
accident. So everybody has an opportunity, in my estimation, Dean, to do something other than film it
Mm-hmm.
or stand around and talk about it.
You grasp the stakes. We joked about the stakes on Joy Reid's show months ago, where like Trump comes in, you guys are going to a camp, you're going first. I even joked with you, Michael, you're gone. I said, like, he's gone.
He did,
Joy,
folks. The
and then
brother,
I'm like,
the brother had the car coming to my front
I'm
door.
like, he's gone. And then I'm like, Joy, if they get you, I leave. But there are other people who don't believe it's true. And I would love to believe it's not true, but I study history too much. And so if history turns out to be not the predictive indicator of where we're going, then good. All right. I was wrong, but I think you better be ready because I don't think we're going to be wrong. His instincts are exactly the same as we've seen on the History Channel of horrific leaders who are dictators, autocrats, fascists. That's his instincts. He's a bitter, angry, vicious man. And people get because he's quiet.
Imagine an angry 10-year-old, 11-year-old, 12-year-old with a massive amount of power to do something about that anger.
And with
That's
immunity too, thanks to the
and
GOP
has
Supreme
immunity
Court.
thanks to a Supreme Court, or keep the analogy going, parents who say, okay, you got cover. You know what that reminds me of is like when I would act up in Catholic school as a young kid, and back in those days we had the nuns, the
Mhm.
Sisters of Holy Name Jesus and Mary was the order at St. Gabriel's. God loved those sisters, and they would discipline me in the moment. And it was the ruler over the knuckles sort of stereotype for so you get the visual. But then the most important thing was what happened when you got home. And what our political leaders are today, when you have a Dean Obeidallah or a Joy Reid or a Liz Cheney who's trying to discipline in the moment,
Mhm.
right? Against the bad behavior. And then you run home and mommy and daddy being, Republican leadership, even Democratic leadership, sitting there saying, oh, okay, don't worry about that. Right.
Right.
Or, cussing sister out for doing the right thing, right? Blaming sister, well, she was wrong, and getting nasty about it. Instead of doing like my mama did, finding that belt. I got the ruler at home. I got the belt when I got when I got from school.
Right.
That reinforcement is how you teach and how you make the lesson real. That what sister was reprimanding you for, what Dean is saying on his podcast, what Joy is saying on her show, what I'm saying on mine, what Liz has said on the January 6th committee. There's a reason for that. It's not out of selfishness, but out of love for the greater good, meaning the
Yeah.
country. And so our leadership has failed us because they found it easier to be less confrontational and less and more hopeful that you'll learn by saying, "Oh, okay, ignore what sister did, ignore what folks are saying, ignore the lies." I mean, just like yesterday in the Pam Bondi hearing. How the hell do you sit there and let this woman get away with ignoring the fact that she would not say that the election was stolen? in that moment, it's like, I stand up behind the desk and I look at her and I say, ma'am, you can leave. You are unfit for the job. You need to get the hell out of this room. That's what Republicans should have done. But they don't have
No, they
what
won't.
it takes to do that.
No, of course.
So
Republicans
it's
won't.
left to the rest of us, Dean,
Yeah.
to at least engage in a way in which you hope you inspire enough people. I mean, I don't need you to get angry. I need you to be committed to what it is.
I agree.
That's in front of you, to fight that thing, because, man.
Look, I'm half Sicilian. I've enough anger to go around.
Right.
All right. My Palestinian
I've been angry
side,
for a long time.
my Palestinian side tempers my Sicilian side. So I'm telling people, you don't have to get angry. Michael's right. I'll get angry for you, but stay engaged. Don't compromise your values, and don't put your head down and hope that it all goes away, because it's not. It's not that easy. History doesn't work that way. Michael, I want to thank you. We went long here. I really appreciate your time. It's always a pleasure chatting with you. Watch Michael's show, MSNBC, the weekend, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern times. I've told you before, I listen in the gym. That's when I go to the gym on Saturday and Sunday. I listen, unless I'm going on Ellie Velish's show at 10, then I'm preparing to go on the show. But barring that,
you go.
I listen to the gym. Thanks, brother. Have a great weekend.
Hey, man, it's always a pleasure.